The race for Senate gets a little tighter as a new poll shows Beto O'Rourke closing in on Ted Cruz.
He has been inundated with California celebrities. Ellen DeGeneres is thrilled with his statement.
This week we hear from Senator Cruz about the campaign. Criminal charges from Beto O'Rourke's past resurface as the campaign for Senate heats up. But is the story true or just political hype? We'll put the story to the truth-o-meter test. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. The battle between Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz is the biggest race on the Texas ballot this November, and that race is getting closer. A new NBC News Marist poll of registered voters shows the Republican with a 4-point lead over O'Rourke. Cruz once had a double-digit lead, but that's tightened as O'Rourke campaigns around Texas. O'Rourke is getting praise and criticism over his response when a man asked him if he thought it was disrespectful for NFL players who kneel in protest during the national anthem. The video of his answer went viral. O'Rourke said reasonable people could disagree on the issue, then compared military members to civil rights workers who fought for freedom.
Peaceful, nonviolent protests, including taking a knee at a football game to point out that black men, unarmed, black teenagers, unarmed, and black children, unarmed, are being killed at a frightening level right now, including by members of law enforcement, without accountability and without justice. And this problem, as grave as it is not going to fix itself. And they're frustrated, frankly, with people like me and those in positions of public trust and power who have been unable to resolve this or bring justice for what has been done and to stop it from continuing to happen in this country. And so nonviolently, peacefully, while the eyes of this country are watching these games, they take a knee to bring our attention and our focus to this problem to ensure that we fix it. That is why they are doing it, and I can think of nothing more American than to peacefully stand up or take a knee for your rights anytime, anywhere, any place. So thank you very much for asking.
Senator Cruz criticized O'Rourke for that statement and called the protests disrespectful to veterans and the flag. Cruz has stepped up attacks to paint O'Rourke as someone who's out of touch with Texas values, but he's also touting his own record. Our Phil Prazen spoke one-on-one with the senator.
The issue of NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem has become a campaign issue here in the Texas Senate race. You just heard from Congressman Beto O'Rourke. I spoke to his opponent, Senator Ted Cruz, earlier this week about that and many other issues. Here's what he had to say.
Didn't find it disrespectful at all, and in fact he said he couldn't think of anything more American than kneeling in protest of the national anthem. And I got to say, look, I think that is an answer out of step with most Texans. It's interesting, since he put that out, he has been inundated with California celebrities. Ellen DeGeneres is thrilled with his statement.
And a lot of money.
And not billions, millions of dollars flowing in from all over the country. But this election's in Texas. The last I checked, Ellen DeGeneres wasn't a registered voter in Texas, nor is Rosie O'Donnell. And in Texas, look, the common sense values we believe in, we respect the flag. Texans stand for the flag. We put our hand over our heart. We're proud to honor the soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines who fight to defend the flag. We're proud to defend our veterans. And look, there are a lot of us who are football fans who are doing what I've been doing, which is turning off the TV because those NFL players are disrespecting something that I love very much. They may have a First Amendment right to do it, but we don't have a right to embrace what they're saying.
I was reading the Dallas Morning News. They had a story that only about a fourth of the damage that Harvey's done has been kind of offset with public dollars. Senator John Cornyn told me today that there will likely not be another aid package from Congress. Are you okay with that?
Well, we've had, in the weeks and months after Harvey, we saw enormous bipartisan agreement coming together to ensure that Texas received the federal disaster relief that we needed and that we were entitled to under federal law. I worked very closely with John Cornyn. We had 3 major disaster relief bills.
But you don't think we need another standalone aid bill? You think that current money is going through the system enough?
There are billions that have already flowed, and there's billions more that is coming as the process moves forward. And the role my staff is trying to play and that I'm trying to play is speeding that up, facilitating it, making sure the federal authorities are aware of the needs on the ground, the priorities of the local officials, and we're going to continue doing that.
Both Cruz and O'Rourke are supposed to face off in a series of debates, but the campaigns have not yet agreed on the debate formats. The first debate is scheduled for Friday night in Dallas, but it may not happen. O'Rourke is currently scheduled to be in El Paso that night.
Let's examine the facts about his character. He has a criminal record that includes DWI and burglary arrests.
Criminal charges from Beto O'Rourke's past resurface as the campaign for Senate heats up. But is the story true or trumped up politics? Gardner Selby from PolitiFact Texas joins us to put the story to the Truthometer test. It's been 1 year since Hurricane Harvey pounded the Texas coast, and the bills keep coming in for recovery work.
I don't think there's going to be more money coming from the federal level, at least not in large chunks.
We'll go one-on-one with Senator John Cornyn to get his vision for the future of federal funding for Harvey relief. You're watching State of Texas. It's been a much-discussed week in politics when it comes to Texas race for U.S. Senate. As we mentioned, a new poll shows Democrat Beto O'Rourke polling within 4 points of GOP incumbent Ted Cruz. But this week, there's also talk about a possible arrest in O'Rourke's past in his hometown of El Paso. It's been a much-discussed week in politics when it comes to Texas race for U.S. Senate. As we mentioned, a new poll shows Democrat Beto O'Rourke polling within 4 points of GOP incumbent Ted Cruz. But this week, there's also talk about a possible arrest in O'Rourke's past in his hometown of El Paso. And here with the facts of the matter, Gardner Selby of the Austin American-Statesman, which has since 2010 been the headquarters for the nonpartisan fact-checking PolitiFact Texas project. Welcome.
Good to be here.
So an arrest. This is not the first time we've heard this tale. Let's take a look at this ad.
Let's examine the facts about his character. He has a criminal record that includes DWI and burglary arrests.
Now, this is a TV ad from 2012 sponsored by the U.S. Representative Sylvester Reyes from back then, before O'Rourke beat him in the congressional primary that year. But these accusations stem from something much earlier, right?
That's right. And it's a little shocking, frankly, that that ad was still out there online for all of us to look at. We're looking 6 years later. But having said that, the charges go way back to the 1990s. When we looked at this, we decided we would do a background check first to see what records turned up, and found minimal confirmation from courthouse files that, in fact, O'Rourke, as a UTEP student, University of Texas El Paso student, was arrested and charged with burglary, apparently, he said later, for trying to get over a fence with some fellow students, misdemeanor. That was later disposed of. And then, in 1998, he was stopped in El Paso for DWI, driving while intoxicated, much more serious charge, he's acknowledged. In that instance, he went to DWI school, and that went away.
So we saw the mugshot, we saw the list of arrests. You know, how were you able to verify all this?
Well, I mentioned that background check we did. We also went back and looked at news stories, and we found accounts from the earliest time that he ran for office. He ran for the city council and got elected to the El Paso City Council. His opponent at the time brought up the arrest and said something to the effect of, this is a sign of his character, or this is a sign we've got to watch out for this guy. And O'Rourke was straightforward about saying, yes, I was arrested for DWI, and I feel like I have been a good citizen since.
So you reached out to the O'Rourke campaign.
Yes.
What did they have to say?
They said, look at the record, and they offered some more news clips and other examples of O'Rourke talking about it, and didn't deny that those two arrests occurred.
So why is this coming up again? Does this have anything to do with Ted Cruz?
It might. Of course, as we all know, O'Rourke is challenging the Republican senator. We have not heard anything directly from Cruz's campaign about these arrests, and I haven't seen a sign of them advertising on it. We have gotten 2 or 3 emails a week from readers who say, what about Beto O'Rourke's criminal record? When are you going to fact check that?
So what does the Truthometer say about this one?
When a claim is correct, it's at that far end of the meter. It's what you're looking for in life and politics. This is a true statement by Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate.
All right, Gardner, you can follow him and the PolitiFact Project on Twitter under @PolitiFactTexas. Thank you, Gardner.
Good to be here.
The costs to recover from Hurricane Harvey keep rising, but federal funds might not provide much more relief.
We're going to make sure Texas is treated fairly, but it's going to be working together with the state and local officials.
We'll go one-on-one with Senator John Cornyn to get his vision for the future of federal funding for Harvey relief. And they worked for months from sunrise to sunset to help rebuild from hurricane damage. Why some of them aren't getting the pay they deserve. A big part of the push to modernize our military will happen right here in Texas. Austin is the home of the Army's new Futures Command Center. The center had its official activation ceremony on Friday. Austin won out over several other cities vying for the center. The Army has said the command center will employ about 500 service members and civilians. Work at the center will focus on how to modernize the service and prepare for future wars. Both Texas senators were on hand for the activation ceremony. Politics reporter Phil Prazen caught up with Senator John Cornyn to talk about the importance of the center and about the changing political climate in Washington.
500 people will be in Austin next year working at the Army Futures Command. Best case scenario, when do you hope to see results that make our military better?
Well, this is a huge problem, particularly because of our near-peer competitor, China, which has become very aggressive in stealing technology, intellectual property, and finding ways to exploit gaps in our foreign investment system to get access to some of these things that they use not only to gain economic advantage, but also to gain military advantage. And the reason why the world is as safe as it is, even in the midst of a dangerous world, is because the United States dominates, and that dominance is what helps keep the peace. But Austin is a perfect place, I think, for the military to interact with the private sector, and some of these initiatives that the Department of Defense has undertaken, and now the Army here in Austin are I think, very exciting and will help keep our country safer.
So this weekend is the 1-year anniversary since Harvey. Do you think that Texas has recovered enough? Are you happy with the progress we've made?
Well, I'm sure it varies on an individual basis. I know there's still people who are not back in their homes, or people who just recently gotten back in their homes. It's been devastating and disruptive to the lives of many, many people. We've worked very hard after the storm to try to make sure that the federal government stepped up and did what it needs to do by providing disaster relief, and to make sure that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and others were fulfilling the needs of our local communities. But really, what I think we saw from Hurricane Katrina that hit Louisiana is what happens when you have weak leadership at the local and state level. Thankfully, Governor Abbott stepped up, our mayors and our county judges and local officials stepped up here with Hurricane Harvey, and I think made the best out of a bad situation. But this is going to take years. Some of the projects now that are being done with the money that we were able to get appropriated by the federal government are going to mitigate or lessen future harm from hurricanes, because we know Harvey's not going to be the last one, and we've got huge population centers here in Texas that are vulnerable, and if they get hit and we're not prepared, then it's going to disrupt not only lives but our entire economy, and we're doing the best we can to prevent that.
So earlier Congress passed a series of disaster aid bills, right, more than $140 billion. A lot of that went to western wildfires and to Florida, but some of that went to Texas. So the Dallas Morning News reported that only about 1/4 of the damage that's been done with Harvey has been offset by government aid. Is there more money coming down the line?
Well, I think it's a combination of sources. Some people have private insurance, some people, and certainly that fulfills an important need. Federal government has a responsibility. Local government, like the Harris County, Houston, just recently had a bond election to step up and pay the local community share of the aid, because it's not all going to come from the federal government 100 cents on the dollar. It's going to be a combination of sources. But I don't think there's going to be more money coming from the federal level, at least not in large chunks. Right now what we're trying to do it's like the proverbial python trying to digest a pig. It takes a long time for the money to go from the federal government down to state and down to local, down to the individual citizen, and that's what's happening now, and that's what we're focusing now, as well as these projects to mitigate against future harm from future storms. People
will say, well, look at Harvey and say Republicans aren't doing enough in Congress to stop these big, strong storms on the climate change perspective. What's your side of that argument?
Well, I don't have any doubt that humans have an impact on the environment we live in. It's just natural, and with the population increasing in particular places like Houston, for example, there's less and less places for the water to flow when it rains like it did for 5 or 6 days with 60 inches of rain. But I do think that there is the thing that some people miss when they talk about the government imposing, let's say, a carbon tax or some new layer of administration or regulation on top of what we have now. They're missing the fact that we have largely learned how to innovate our way out of problems in the past. We used to have horses and horse-drawn carriages and a lot of manure left in our cities. It was a public health hazard, and what changed that is the development of the internal combustion engine. At one point, there was a threat that millions of people would starve to death because we haven't produced enough food, and then you got people like Norman Borlaug, who won the Nobel Prize for the Green Revolution, and feeding millions of people and saving their lives. So I think, to me, rather than more government regulation, what we need is more innovation, and we ought to encourage that kind of research and development to deal with these issues.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's great.
State and federal leaders are bragging about the success of the hurricane recovery efforts.
Congress approved over $35 billion for disaster relief and recovery for the state of Texas.
The recovery is making progress, but some of the people doing the work are facing a new crisis.
We need to keep track of this. We need to make sure that the people helping the state get paid.
Why some workers are not getting the money they earned while working long shifts to rebuild after Hurricane Harvey. It's been 1 year since Hurricane Harvey pounded the Texas coast. Recovery work is still not complete, but state and federal leaders are touting the progress. Vice President Mike Pence visited areas hit by the hurricane. He spoke to a crowd at a church in Rockport and spoke glowingly about the resilience shown by Texans. But local leaders point out there's still a lot of rebuilding left to do. In the days and months after Harvey, thousands of people worked from sunrise to sunset to help rebuild what had been damaged. But not all of those workers received the pay they deserved. James Berrigan has been investigating reports of worker exploitation. Now, after Harvey, what did you find?
Well, Josh, this is a project with the Center for Investigative Reporting that we did at the Dallas Morning News. And what you would think is that there would be pay for the people who helped rebuild the state after such a devastating hurricane. We found that not to be true in some cases. And we found that the state, while they should know that there is going to be these cases of wage exploitation after a natural disaster, they were not prepared and did not do very much to prepare for this type of case.
How common was it for these people to get ripped off? You know, who were these people?
That's one of the big problems that we found. It's not clear how common it was because the Texas Workforce Commission, which is the agency that's tasked with handling wage claims, didn't keep track of how many of these cases were related to the hurricane. But we were able to document just from the Dallas Morning News perspective, 19 cases. And then we also spoke to worker centers, nonprofits that were talking to hundreds of people who said that their wages had not been paid. So it's not clear how much it happened, but it's very clear that it did happen and that it was mostly targeted at Spanish-speaking, undocumented labor a lot of the times.
Now, I know you say the agency, didn't track that type of information, but was there any way to measure the complaints, or was there a spike in it, or did you compare it to anything?
That is one of the things that we really wanted to check, if there had been a spike compared to previous years. But because the Texas Workforce Commission didn't keep track of those, we couldn't compare. What we did find, though, is that over the years, the Texas Workforce Commission only hands out wages to about 42% of the cases that they order wages paid to. And it's very difficult for them to keep track of it because they only have 19 labor law investigators who are tasked to look at these claims when they get about 13,000 cases a year. That's about 700 cases per investigator.
You know, when we hear a lot of things like we don't have enough investigators or anything, do you feel like that this will prompt the agency to possibly ask for more? Because, you know, there will be disasters down the road.
Exactly, yeah, and that's one of the things that labor experts were telling us. There are going to be more disasters. We need to keep track of this. We need to make sure that the people helping the state get paid. It's unclear, you know, the budget requests are going to be coming up for the next legislative session soon, but it's unclear whether the Texas Workforce Commission is going to do that. I think what we heard the most from these worker centers and nonprofits that work with the workers who have had their wages stolen is that they need action from legislators, and they've been asking for that action for many years. So we'll see if that comes.
Yep, I appreciate you looking into this, a very important topic. You can see more of the report at the Dallas Morning News website. James, thank you for coming in with us.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.